Alright, so I'm back working on the Miata. Today I'm just focusing on the exhaust manifold. I want to get that pretty much buttoned up so I don't have to worry about it. The only thing left to do is going to be to install the wastegate. So we have a 46mm precision. This is the one that came off the car on the old exhaust manifold. The plan is to put it here. Basically the point of entry into the turbo, there's a 90-degree bend here. The idea behind that 90-degree bend is to sort of promote exhaust gas flow into the wastegate. That's going to help give us more accurate boost control, prevent boost creep, that kind of thing. Just makes tuning and closed loop boost control a lot easier. So what I'm going to do is basically just get this installed in a location that I feel is going to look good and make the most sense. We can't go up too high because of the hood clearance. I'm thinking straight on. I would like to keep it somewhat parallel with the turbo. I might angle it a little bit inward to kind of keep it maybe more parallel with the motor. That might be a good look. We have two options as far as the angle of which the wastegate's going to dump out. I don't plan on recirculating it back into the exhaust. I always just sort of ran a dump tube. The car's going to have two different setups. It's going to have a street setup where it's going to have a full exhaust, all that fun stuff. And in which case we can run this and plumb it back into the downpipe to keep everything contained, to keep it street legal. And then we'll have a drag setup, and the drag setup, it's likely all going to come out the fender over here. So we'll run the downpipe up and out. Obviously we'll heat shield all of this, but I think this is going to be the best location for it because we can just either run a 90 down and out underneath the car, or we can plumb it out the fender, or we can even come right out the front fender. There's quite a few options, so I think this will probably be the best route. We might even potentially have room to run it inward because part of me wants to keep all the weight as close to the center, almost the center of gravity with the engine. That way we're not putting too much stress on the manifold hardware. So I'm just going to show a couple of different techniques of how I would get this done. Right now everything's mocked up so we can easily unbolt it. But first step's going to be to sort of figure out the cope for the shape of this. And we keep that easy and simple. I do have a tool from Centural which is used for roll bar tubing for notching and all that. This can be applied here. So it's something to just keep this easy. That being said, go grab this. Alright, so we're going to come off that elbow with a piece of 1.5" Schedule 10 pipe. That's going to be nice and thick. It should put up with the heat and vibration enough so that we don't have any cracks or anything like that, because you have to imagine that being a 4-cylinder engine, the secondary imbalances are pretty high, so you get a lot of vibration, and you throw the heat into the mix, you get cracking and all of that, and you don't want everything cracking, having to take it all off again, and it's always going to crack at the worst time. It's usually in the middle of racing or whatever, a car show, all of that. So we're going to do everything we can to make sure that we don't get any of that. So we're doing everything overkill. That being said, so we need to find the cope, essentially the shape here around the manifold elbow. And a simple way of doing that is utilizing a coping tool. And again, this one's from Centural, which is where you can get it right online. Not a big deal. It's just a 3D printed fixture with some wire in it. So generally what you would do is use this for roll cage tubing. You can find a cope, complex copes, things like that, and it just makes things a little bit easier. So you can basically slide the pipe right in there and you can trace it out and then cut it to what you need. This is for 1 3/4. However, we can cheat a little bit and use it for our purposes, which would be 1.5" Schedule 10, which comes out to just about 2 inches. So basically we're going to cope it, and then we can slide this in there and make our trace all the way around. So I'm going to do that real quick and push this in. Use my fingers here because sometimes pushing this whole unit on at once will sort of flare out, get a more accurate positioning of where we want it, but this will get us a general idea where we want to be. Just take this, we're going to slide this in here. Nice and easy. Now we have our cope. Let's be careful not to rotate it any. So that's our cope. Pretty easy. Can rock and roll with that. We'll go ahead and cut this. I'm going to make the rough cut first. We're just going to basically cut right along this line, and then we'll go in with the flap disc and just sort of shape it. And that'll pretty much be the easiest route. Realistically, we're only going to probably go to here, and then we're going to cut it because our wastegate flange is not going to be very far off. We don't want it sticking out too far. This thing's going to pretty much sit right up against that. So we really just need a little sliver, nothing crazy. Head over to the chop saw and we'll go ahead and get this cut. All right, so we're going to take our piece and go over to the chop saw. So I'm just going to use the chop saw and not the band saw because we're just making a rough cut. We just want to get the basic angle here, and then we'll do our finish with a flap disc. So grab this, rotate it to the angle that we need. Cut, sorry for the loud noise. And there's our piece. So pretty darn close. Let's go ahead and start with our finish here. Fresh flap disc here. Just jump to a 40 grit as well. Need my goggles. Just knock down the burrs. We'll go take another look and we'll cope it again and get our marks back. It's already very close and we can potentially just fill the gap. But if we want something a little bit cleaner, we just need to cope a little bit more. Set this here. Let's go ahead and put this back. Let's find our center line. I love it. Nice and easy. So that's kind of where we're at. And this is just an easy way to sort of rough in what cope you need. And then from here, go back over and we'll spend some time on the flap disc. Get this thing shaped the way we want. Perfect. Alright, so now we got our piece in the vise. We've got everything marked out. And this is going to be our rough end here. Alright, let's go see how it looks. Got some burrs in here, we'll get those out later. So holding everything up, it's significantly better. We have a little bit of a gap on the side here, but nothing too crazy. So we can take a little bit out from the bottom. That'll close this side gap up a little bit. Probably get our angle a little bit better too. I mean, but honestly, that's close enough. We can fill that with weld. I'm just going to take some off the bottom, and the reason is because right now this tube is angled upwards a little bit, which is going to make the wastegate angled up. And I really kind of want it flat and flush, perpendicular to the ground, because I think that'll just be a better look, all in all. So I might have to dig into it a little bit here. Let me grab this. So basically that's going to go in there. That's going to go there. Yeah, so we'll take a little bit more, that way we can raise this up a hair, get it away from the turbo here. So I like it up here, but that means we need to take some out of the bottom so that we can get our angle down a little bit. I don't mind that, but it's just a little close to the turbo, and if we decide to change this down the road, if we go to like a bigger housing or something like that, then you know that may interfere, and we don't want to have to change everything up. We want this kind of to be future proof. All right, so let's grind some more out of that. So we didn't need a whole lot. We'll go back over and take another look and see if it fits. So we've got, it looks pretty good, because that's going to get us just a little bit off of the collector here, and it should keep us just high enough to where we're not going to interfere with the compressor housing on the turbo. And we have a little bit of wiggle room too. We can rotate this thing around, go up, down with it. We have a piece that's usable. Realistically, we're going to need to cut this down quite a bit, because I don't want the flange past this flange. And keep everything nice and tight, and that's going to put less stress on this joint here. There's going to be so much heat in this particular area that we really want to mitigate any possibility of there being any cracking. So I think we can achieve that by just keeping this runner pretty short and not putting too much heat on our weld, because if we cook the steel, then this is just going to be a weak point, and with that much weight hanging off the front of this thing, it can definitely be prone to failure. Ask me how I know. So we have our wastegate. I'm just going to mock it up one more time and kind of mark where I think we should have this cut to bring it in a bit. So what I would like to do is maybe see the flange begin right about here. Then we'll have our flange. It's going to probably stop here, which is going to bring this in to about here. And that should give us enough room for this V-band clamp to sort of get on and off if we need to do any quick disassembly. So the idea too is ease of maintenance. We don't want this butted up against it, and then we'll never be able to get this clamp on and off if we're ever in a jam. Bringing it out slightly is really significantly help us. So thinking about those kind of things is really important, especially when you're building a race car. So having a little bit of foresight definitely helps. All right, so we'll get that cut down. This time we're going to use a horizontal bandsaw, that way we can get a nice clean cut exactly where we need it. So it's going to be right along this area. So we really don't have a whole lot here, not much meat. But then we'll butt these two up. We'll get a clean weld around that. We'll bolt the wastegate to this flange as a heat sink. It's going to help dissipate heat as we weld it. And then that way we don't warp the flange, because there's nothing more annoying than having an exhaust leak right at the manifold at your wastegate. Which generally happens quite often, so let's get this thing cut down. So we've got our piece here. We need to cut it down. We don't need very much, but we come over to the chop saw and we kind of find ourselves in a little bit of a predicament here where clamping this little bit of a piece isn't really an option. If we were to clamp it here, it's just going to move around, and it also doesn't stick out far enough for us to get the bandsaw in the location where we need to cut. So I'm bringing that down just to kind of show you. So obviously we can't clamp that down to make our cut, because it's just not going to work. So easy enough. We've got this scrap piece here. This is the piece that we cut this one off of. We're going to take it over to the welder, and we're just going to tack weld this piece to this piece so that we can therefore put it in the vise and then make our cut. Kind of seems silly, but it's the only option. We could have left this whole piece really long. You know, in hindsight, we could have done that, but it just would have been a little bit harder to work with. But let's go take it over to the welder and tack it. Alright, so just some easy tacks. No reason to make things complicated. We'll go back over to the horizontal bandsaw and we'll get this thing cut down. So now that we got our part tacked, slide it in here, tighten it up in the vise. Let's drop this down about there where our mark is. It's approximately where we want to be. Put this up, and we'll set our speed. All right, so we got our piece cut. Just chamfer that a bit. So I think what we're going to have to do first is weld this flange to this, and then we can weld this piece to the manifold. Double check fitment with the wastegate bolted to it. Then we can trace out our hole and we can cut that. There's a couple of different ways we can do that. All right, so we just need to press this in. It's a tight fit for this, but it's nice in the long run. So I want to make sure we don't have any gaps down here. No gaps, just dog hair. I'm gonna go ahead and tack that, and then we'll test fit. Go ahead and get these bolted together. Let's pull this fire ring out too, because we don't really need that at the moment. Let's go ahead and get this here. Come on now, hammer. Oh, come on. Pull our fire ring out. If we can get it. Who would have guessed? So we're not going to run the fire ring right now because we're just mocking things up. Put this off. And we're just sort of beating the crap out of this wastegate. Shouldn't do that. It's used, it's not new, so my feelings for it aren't that great. Just do that. Make things a little bit out of it anymore. So rotate this freely now. And that's sort of what we're working with here. I like it. First I was kind of disappointed because I really thought it was going to pull away from the aesthetics of everything up front, but I think with this facing forward, it looked pretty good. Probably keep it closer inboard. Cool thing is, put it really wherever. Alright, so I marked out just sort of general idea where a hole needs to be. Next step's just going to be to pull the manifold off, pull the turbo off, then the manifold, and then we'll get this hole cut. I haven't decided yet. I might just use a plasma torch just to buzz the hole in there real quick, and then we can die grind it out to cope it a little bit, but turbo needs to come off. So let's get that done. Pull that turbo manifold off. Do need some tools here. Fuck, weird. Let's put this away. I don't need it anymore. All right, so there's the manifold. Next step is going to be figure out the best way to cut this. I'm honestly probably just going to pull out the plasma cutter. I've got a little one. I mean, I should make quick work of that. So we'll get that hollowed out. We'll get it cleaned up with the die grinder, and we'll get that piece welded on there so we can call it a day. To put a hole in this, we could just use a hole saw, but to tell you the truth, we sort of have an eccentric circle here. It's not perfect, so once we drill through this with the hole saw, we would still have to go in and die grind everything out, which takes a bunch of time. More efficient option, I think, is going to be just the plasma cutter, because we can get pretty close to this contour and do less overall grinding. So just saves some time. So there's plenty of ways you can do it, but I think this will just be the fastest. So. So if you look, we do have a little bit of overlap. What we're gonna do is work on that a little bit with the die grinder, but we're not gonna get it perfect yet, because when we get this welded on here, we can go in and get in there and actually die grind it out. So here's a little rig. Got the flange clamped down to the wastegate. And I just set this little back purging rig here just to help out the weld. Flange is all welded up. All right, so one thing I got to do to the manifold is seal it up so we can back purge it. So we're just going to tape off the ports here, and instead of taping off down here, I'm going to use some aluminum foil to cover that up because it's going to get hot and the tape's going to melt. Just that easy. And we're going to take it over to the vise because it's just how I want to hold it. So I'm going to tack it and then we'll start the back purging. In this area we are going to need some poke out. What I might even do is unbolt the wastegate, just so I can get into this little area that's pretty tight. But it shouldn't be a big deal. We'll go get it knocked out. So that's just about welded up. So the next thing we're going to do is get in there, and I'm actually going to weld the inside to smooth those edges out. That way we get a nice transition. The exhaust gases basically have a nice transition off the wastegate. The outside is pretty much smoothed out. Alright, so with that welded up, should be pretty much good to go. Well, I think that's pretty much it. It's looking like it. Unfortunately, I wish there was just a better place for it, but at the end of the world. So we're gonna get some hardware on here. We're missing just about everything. The angle of the dangle came out a little differently than I wanted, so I wanted it more parallel with the valve cover, but it'll be all right.